I am Bilal, architect and BIM coordinator and co-founder of the Agile BIM community. First, for people who don't know about Agile BIM community is a community of professionals, architects, engineers, builders, BIM guys dedicated to BIM through Agile principle. And so it's a BIM guys from IC industry. And what we do in practice, we provide resources, support, and education in the wiki. So I just send you the wiki on the chat. And also what we try to do is to organize each month a meetup, as like now, and we invite people, top leaders from the IC industry to present our work and to present the BIM situation and which related to agile in the country. So we have a YouTube channel where you can watch the past meetups. So I will just send you on the chat now, and so feel free to share and to subscribe and to like our videos, so it will have the community to growth and to be more and more. So introduction is done. We have a new series of meetups since as you know, some months ago there was the World Cup of football, and we thought that's in Qatar. So we thought that it will be great and good idea to make the World Cup of BIM. So we did the first event in United Arab Emirates with Bilal 1 month ago. So you can see the replay on our YouTube channel. And now we go to Ireland with one of the top leaders of the BIM in the country, in Ireland, which is Ralph Montague. So welcome, Ralph.
Thank you.
I will start with one question. So who are you, and can you please present yourself?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me to this program. I appreciate it. An architect. I'm based in Dublin, in Ireland. I was originally in South Africa, studied in South Africa, and relocated to Ireland 23 years. I've been here. I suppose I've been on this journey of doing BIM for all that time since graduating. When I graduated, we were still using and pencils and drawing boards, and so I've been on the whole journey through from that CAD and BIM, and it's been very, very exciting. And the last 14 years been focusing on providing BIM consultant support to projects, to clients, to industry, and to companies, to help them face this way of working. So I'll talk a bit about that journey tonight.
Okay, nice. Okay, thank you for your answer. So the second question will be, can you? So we listen and we saw that Ireland is the capital of BIM, as we saw in the chat. Can you provide an overview of the current state of BIM in Ireland, please?
So maybe I'll just So the state of BIM in Ireland has also been a journey. Let's just say it's something that's over a number of years, and it started in 2010 with an organization called the Construction IT Alliance, which is a not-for-profit in Ireland that is focused on helping companies use information communication technologies in construction industry. And we sort of presented this idea. I mean, as an architect, we were already using the software and the programs already, and we that's just after we had started to specialize in this area. So, yeah, it's come along that journey. We worked with the government enterprise board. They formed a sort of a national forum, which sort of sort of brought various industry together to try and discuss what should happen, and that eventually became a BIM council who wrote a position for the government on what to do. That was submitted to government. The government then responded with their procurement position paper, and at the same time there were other things happening. So the Construction IT Alliance was producing some research work in studying what the global BIM strategy was happening in Ireland, developing a roadmap, and for the construction sector, the roadmap to the digital, which was the output document from the BIM Council, was picked up by a group within the government under public expenditure and reform, and they a construction group, and ultimately brought some funding together, which as finally in 2021 set up a special research body called the Build Digital Project. So I think that's the first thing, is that these things don't happen quickly. It takes time. But I suppose what's special about, firstly, is it's a small country. I mean, we're less than 5 million people in the island, and we have the UK obviously as our neighbour, and the UK government had obviously put their strategy in place and have been using their strategy, which had a lot of influence on Ireland, because a lot of Irish companies, across the water in the UK. So although we weren't subject to the UK's mandate as such, but obviously if Irish wanted to work in the UK, they had to adopt BIM. So I think that's definitely been, and I mean that's an interesting point. I think if you're looking at who's leading the in BIM, is there's countries leading and there's countries that are following, but each country is both leading and, because everybody's looking at what everyone else is doing. So you're not one or the other. You're always both. You, on the one hand, you're looking at what other people are doing and trying to learn the lessons, and then you're trying to implement those lessons, and then what you're doing in a country becomes something that other people can follow. So every country is a follower at the same time. But I suppose the advantage of Ireland is when we're talking about agile, like it's a small country and it's quite easy things, because it's small and agile and nimble, in order to make decisions and move people along. So that's where we're at the moment. Now we have this project that launched in 2021. It's a 5 project to research 6 things in relation to the adoption of the digital transition, which include leadership, standards, building competency within the country, at the procurement of projects across the industry, and sustainability. So
okay, great.
That's where we're at the moment. So I suppose there's challenges as well. I think that's something for everyone, that we all learn lessons from each other, because that's, I suppose, part of an agile process is to go through the cycle of plan, do, check, and learn, and take the lessons learned and apply those. So in Ireland, I suppose when you look at this is a picture of Dublin, but I will show people this picture, because when you look at this picture of the built environment, people see something physical, and they don't see that how that came into being was through information. Like, there's a single building in that picture that just sort of happened by accident. There was information produced for every single building, which became the instruction other people on how to build the building and how to put it together, and even to continue to maintain and operate all this built environment infrastructure that you see in this picture requires. So while you're looking at something physical, you have to always remember that behind it is information, and that, I mean, I suppose that's the important point for in your community in our community is to realize the importance of what we do in producing and managing information. So I'd say, and I make this statement, but everything is information, and information is everything. And I mean that literally, because even if you look at the way the world is made and structured, the atoms and molecules and cells and that come together in a sort of particular to make whatever is physical is information. And the definition of the word information even explains that it's this process of creation, of bringing something in form and resolving uncertainty. And so what we do in this sector, in this AEC sector, is incredibly important, but it's not just about building physical things. It's about bringing the information together that will result in the physical things. And if you're talking about a lean or agile, then obviously, we've got to do that in the most efficient and way. And so the question really isn't need information. Of course, we need information. Like a building can't happen without information. But the question is, does the information have to be digital? And the answer is no. Like, we've built buildings for thousands of years without digital information. So it is possible buildings without digital information. That's not the issue. The issue is about scale. Like, we deliver at the moment now to meet the needs of the world, the infrastructure that's required. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Belgium, but in Ireland, even though we're a world country, we can't produce enough housing or enough schools or enough hospitals or roads or telecommunication infrastructure or energy infrastructure to meet the needs of our own society, never mind the rest of the world. So like, we're just not be able to keep up anymore with this need, and to do that in a sort of a cost-efficient way, to a high level of quality in a safe way, and also to deal with climate change. I mean, the construction, everybody knows the construction industry is one of the most is the biggest contributors to CO2 and climate. So 40% of the problem is from our own industry. And so the reason to look at digital is to look at changing and improving this process and making it more productive. And that's why it's really interesting to look at things like agile and lean, all these things. But those are just words. At the end of the day, like, it's about making the whole process more productive and using technologies. Now, of course, especially in the last few months, everybody's really worried about the machines taking over and AI and news reporting that 300 million jobs are going to be lost to AI, and like all these things. Actually,
big debate, yeah.
But that's not because there's certain things that machines can do really well, and machines are brilliant at doing repetitive and mundane and tedious tasks over and over without stopping, tea breaks, no holidays, no weekends. Machines love that kind of stuff. They can just work doing that kind of stuff. But machines can't create or think or interact with other people, or so there's certain things that humans can do and there's certain things that machines can do really well. And actually, it's not one or the other. We don't need one or the other. We need the combination of technology and people to meet this problem, to deliver on the problem scale. So instead of being worried about machines, I suppose we be looking at how we can work together to deliver this problem. I think the biggest problem we have in Ireland, and I would say everywhere, is this issue of quality of information and the impact the quality of information is having on the built environment. And when I talk about quality of information, you know, a scale from good to bad. But I mean, the way I would define quality information is about being complete and resolved and coordinated and on time, and, you know, available to people and useful. And obviously, the opposite of that would be incomplete, unresolved, late, withheld, whatever. And if you agree with my first point that everything is information, the way everything gets built is through information, then you understand that if you have good information, then the chances of things going well are much higher. If you have bad information, then the chances of things going badly are much higher. You know, and I think if you've worked in this industry, then you know that that's what happens. And now, of course, when it comes to producing perfect information, be the most expensive information in terms of the time and to produce it. You've really got to get it right, and you know, that takes time, and time is money at the end of the day. But when it comes to executing the work on site, the cheapest way to build is if all the information was perfect. If there was no change on site, if people could just do their work, execute, and yeah, that was it. Never have to redo the work, never have to change anything, no delays, no disruptions. You know, that would be the cheapest way of building. There's this relationship between the time and the cost of producing information and the cost of actually executing the work on site. And yeah, but I suppose when you look at those two costs, it's much cheaper to produce information than it is to fix something on site. I mean, everybody knows the most expensive and the most disruptive and the most dangerous place to make any change is on site, you know, and or have any delay. So, you know, the cheapest, quickest, and safest place to make any change is before you try and do the work on site. And you know, in BIM, that's within a model. You know, so it's getting people to think about this, doing the work at the right time, and you know, that's kind of a lean, agile is doing the right work at the right time, and right result, rather than having to change it. So I think, you know, to this topic of today, like the relationship between lean principles and agile and BIM, I mean, there's definitely a tight relationship, because if you take any task that has to be carried out, that task is, there's going to be three things that are required for the task. There's going to be input, there's going to be material input, and I don't just mean, you know, the materials, but also the tools and equipment and hardware and software and everything that's required. And then there's going to be information, because you can't carry out a task if there's no information to tell you what the task is. So those are the inputs to the task, and then the output of the task is obviously there's the physical output, but there's also an information output of the task. Did the task complete correctly? Yeah, record of the tasks that will be needed later, and that form the next task. Yeah, so I think that's really interesting when you think about agile approach, when you're trying to take a very complex thing and bring it into small sprints of work, and to think about how the thing you're doing today is going to influence the output of the tasks and the next task. Okay, the information is related to things like a definition of the scope, the time or the schedule, costs, a definition of the quality, and the safety, and even sustainability. I don't have sustainability there, but that's all. It's fine to talk about all that stuff, but the reality in construction is that we're producing so much waste in the construction industry. I mean, over 30%, or like institutes like the Lean Construction Institute would say closer to 50% of what the industry produces is waste. So wasted time, effort, duplication of work, abortive work, all these things listed here. Because that's what we need to try and address. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if we can improve the information that feeds into tasks, then we should get a better output. And so that's the relationship.
I will ask the first question. So,
yeah.
So on the chat also, don't hesitate if you have any question. So my first question is about Lean and BIM in Ireland. How things are going on, and how you see things on practice in Ireland.
Well, so both those things are doing quite well. So we have a Lean Construction Institute in Ireland that are doing a lot of work with the industry and promoting Lean practices. Organizations like the Construction IT Alliance and others that are promoting practices. I suppose what I don't see a lot of is those two coming together.
Okay.
And I suppose that's what I'm trying to this slide, is that it's a coming together of information and this, because Lean, as the Lean people are focused on the practices and the procedures, and but they don't really think about the information input to that, and the BIM people are more interested in information and not sort of not seeing how that's fitting into practices and the actual execution of work. So I mean, there obviously are projects and companies that are doing both of those, but it's not every company. So it's a small percentage of companies. So there's still work to do to bring these things together. I don't actually know what percentage of company of are doing both. I'm not even sure if there are studies that have looked at both of those things. And,
Great.
But I think the fact that there are institutes looking at these things and working with industry is positive.
So it's a good start.
Yeah. So like the things, I mean, the whole idea of Lean is to reduce waste. I mean, that's the whole principle, is to look at removing waste from the system, and therefore making it more productive. So that there's more efficient output, and you're not spending time and money and material on waste. Okay. So the first thing I want to is, if you believe what I'm saying about this relationship between information and productive process, then you have to look at how we produce information. And obviously there's three ways of producing information that's related to. So the first way is you can do it in the traditional way, which I'm just calling no BIM, is you describe a building through drawings and schedules and specifications in the normal way. So two-dimensional, paper-based, or even if it's electric-based, but it's not, they're not connected. Like each drawing is drawn separately, each is typed out separately. So there's several documents that try to do the one building. Okay, and the problem with that methodology is that there's inconsistencies and errors between all those documents, and when it gets to site and the execution of work, well, those errors and inconsistencies cause delay and initiate RFIs and disputes and all sorts of problems. And everybody knows that's what happens. Okay, so that's one way of work. I mean, the second way is what I'm calling the BIM approach, and what I call a true approach, where is you build the building first in software. So you assemble the building and you make sure that everything fits and works and is coordinated, and you test that virtual building from a sequencing point of view and a cost point of view and performance and analysis point of view, and then you use that digital to produce outputs. So because our contracts still require us to have and schedules, etc. But the idea is, if you're doing BIM properly, nobody's drawing a drawing anymore. The model is generating the drawing, and nobody's typing the schedule. The model is generating the schedule. So all the information, all the outputs are the same database of information, and it's all coordinated. Now, it could be wrong across the whole set, so it doesn't take away the problem. But of course, if it's wrong everywhere, it's more likely to be picked up than if it's wrong in one place. So you're eliminating the errors and omissions, and you're coming to the execution process with better coordinated information, and therefore a chance of executing without the usual problems. And then the third way of working, which I'm calling pseudo BIM, and unfortunately there's a lot of that happening. So pseudo BIM is where maybe the client asks for BIM, but everybody still carries on doing what they used to do 20 years ago. So they first go and produce drawings and schedules and all the usual, and then in the corner of the office somewhere is the BIM guy or girl who has to take all that stuff and try and reproduce it in a model. And that to me is the least efficient of working, because you started with an inefficient process in the first place, and then you've just added something to it. But the biggest problem with pseudo BIM is that the drawings and schedules, which are the contract documents, have not been produced from the model. They've been produced quickly, and so there's the model has no contractual status, if you like, and it's just a nice visualization. But if you looked at these three methodologies in terms of how much original work is required to do it, how much rework is required, in other words, if you need to make a change, can you make the change once in the model, or do you have to go and change several drawings, and just managing and the quality, etc. So BIM is definitely the most efficient way of working if you do it properly. But if you do BIM, it's the least efficient way of working because you're effectively doing the work twice, and so from an efficiency in methodology point of view, like, it's definitely, in terms of producing the BIM is the most efficient, most productive way of working. And then when it comes to production, and in our industry, production means like executing the work on site. Useful to compare construction to manufacturing. Now, everybody says to me when I do this, yes, but construction isn't manufacturing. Because manufacturing, you're producing 1,000 of the same thing, whereas in construction, you're producing one building at a time. Okay, and that, okay. So, but I'm just trying to see what we can learn from manufacturing. But the thing I say is, buildings and infrastructure, while they might all be individual at the overall level, the products and components of buildings are very standardized. In other words, in order to get a construction product onto it takes years of development and testing and certification, etc. So at the component level, buildings and infrastructure are quite standardized. You have to use standard materials that are available on the market that are have gone through all this R&D and testing. So, and that's really interesting with BIM, because BIM is about looking at objects or components, and those objects and components are standardized. They're not all bespoke. The way together might be bespoke, but anyway, I think the interesting manufacturing is when they design some product, the first thing they do is they design it software, and they know exactly where every nut and bolt and screw and washer is going to go. So it's fully resolved and coordinated in this digital model, and then that allows them, when it comes to procurement, to buy all the parts from anywhere they like in the world, because they know exactly how many parts are going to go into that product. So the procurement is very easy in finding the right parts from the right suppliers at the right time. And then when it comes to in manufacturing, and this is the key point that we can learn from when they assemble a product on the assembly line, they don't make any changes. Like as the car or whatever is going down the assembly, it's not as if the mechanic says, you know what, today I'm feeling like I'm going to move this pipe else, or I'm going to do something different. Yeah, because they don't know what change affect somebody else down the assembly line. So they assemble the product exactly according to the design as it goes down the line. As they do that, when it comes to the maintenance operation of the car, there's basically a version of the product, because you created this digital version in order to assess the physical product, and the digital version with all the parts. And that's why you can go into a shop anywhere, and somebody can type on a computer and find the parts you need in the car in a couple of seconds. Yeah, everything is digitized and available as information. When you look at construction, it's completely different. Like the first thing, we don't actually fully design anything before we go to procurement. We partly do. In other words, designers, architects, and engineers, they do what's called design intent. It gives an idea of what's going to be constructed, but it's not actually what's constructed, because that needs input from constructors and fabricators and specialist designers and contractors. So that design intent is uncoordinated, resolved. It goes to the market for pricing and procurement. The contractors look at that and they sort of make a judgment of what it will cost. So they buy the contract at risk, and then they have to work it out during production. So that's when things get worked out on site. Well, this thing's not going to fit here. I've got to move it. I've got to do this change. And so there's a lot of things that are happening in the most expensive, most disruptive, and most unsafe place, which is on site. But besides that, I mean, buildings do get built in the day, so they do get finished. But at the end, the information that produced that building in the first place is all wrong, because people have made changes and nobody's captured those changes. So you get boxes full of drawings and reports and schedules, but you have no idea that if that information is right or wrong, because of changes that have taken place.
We have a question related to this subject from Sin McGann. Thank you, Sin, for your question. So the question is: do you think the construction industry requires more professionals from manufacturing who have a proven record for lean to transfer to the construction industry? So it's related to the subjects. What is your opinion about that?
Yeah, I think the construction industry needs to learn from lean, whether it needs to be somebody from manufacturing or somebody who understands lean. I mean, I suppose, I'm not sure. if it has to be someone from manufacturing. But somebody has to educate the construction industry about these principles of removing waste and planning with the end in mind, and using agile. If like agile is only useful in projects where there's lots of unknowns, and and that, I suppose, in construction where there's lots of changes happening, that's quite good. But yes, there needs to be an education. People need to understand this. They need to understand the implications of what they're doing today on people down. And that's the big problem in construction, is that in manufacturing, the whole process from design to assembly in one organization. Okay, but in construction, that's not the case. The design is owned by the designer, and the construction is owned by the contractors. And the designers don't really care how what they do is going to affect somebody in construction, and vice versa. So we need to begin to look at the life cycle and marry how all of this works together. So, but yes, we need from manufacturing, and I think the one lesson I could say that we could learn from manufacturing, they build it twice. They build the product virtually first, put it out in a quick, cheap, safe environment, like in software, and then they execute perfectly on action. We do it the other way around. We design poorly and then execute poorly. So, but we're doing it once. So we're sort of going through this iterative process. So you never really know what the finished product is going to be until it's finished. And that's so, like, instinctively you might think something twice sounds more like it's going to take more time than building it once. But I think manufacturing has proved that to build something twice is more efficient than to build it once. So I think that's the key lesson we can learn. Now, I mean, think, well, you can't do that in construction because we don't have time. Like, we on site and start digging, and we don't have time to build this digital version first. But that's not entirely true. So the first thing is, if you agree with my point that you've got to create the information anyway, whichever way you do that. Like, there's no way to start work on site and without any information. So you're either going to produce that information in a sort of very no BIM way, or you're going to produce that information in an efficient way. But you still have to produce the information. So that's the first point. And to do it in the most efficient way. The second point is, these things can run in tandem. So as long as you are producing the element in BIM and coordinating it and resolving it and finishing that in BIM before you get to site, so that it can inform the work on site, then these two things can run in tandem. So you could imagine the program for the development of BIM running ahead of the program for the development of construction. You don't have to have fully did everything in BIM, down to the paint on the wall, etc. Before digging the foundations. You can do these things in tandem. This approach of building it twice allows you to sort out problems quickest, cheapest, safest place, which is in the model rather than on site, and also gives us really interesting opportunity that towards the end of a project, the BIM is completely finished and available to the client and the team to look at and go through and understand and start setting up their maintenance regimes and testing and training of staff, etc., while the physical building is being finished. And so I think that's interesting as well. I mean, I've heard of a project where they run the building virtually for 2 years before the physical construction complete, and so that's a really interesting idea. But of course, I mean, it all comes down to the way we buy, so procurement. And if you're going to build something twice, you have to buy it twice. So you have to buy the information first, so that the information is available to go and buy the physical product. And that's where construction down, because clients will go and buy a design from designers, and then they'll give the design, which is incomplete, to a contractor, and then the contractors will go and buy specialist design from subcontractors, and then they'll come construction, and then and then you have this problem of effectively go and buy the handover information again, because you have to capture every change that has taken place during construction. So you end up buying the 3 times as a client. And whereas in manufacturing, because it's all in one process that's owned, the design is informing the construction, and you have these feedback loops. And that's why these lean approaches work so well in manufacturing, because the construction process is able to feed back into the design problem, and vice versa. So it's going to be a challenge for construction to embrace this way of thinking, but it starts with the people who set up the contracts. So if you set up a contract in a way that keeps everything separate and sort of, and it's as adversarial, not trying to work together, then that's what you're going to get, a very fragmented process. But if you set up a contract that's collaborative and integrates everybody in an integrated process, then you'll get a better result. And that's possible in construction, to have integrated project delivery.
Can we say that building before making construction is an investment? Because you will indeed, you will not have a lot of rework, not have a lot of problems. So can we say that's an investment and not just build it twice? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, you have to produce information anyway. I mean, there's never been a project. The pyramids, people communicated with each other. That information, somebody gave someone an instruction to go and put a block of stone somewhere. The stone didn't arrive there. So there's always been information, and so clients are paying for information anyway. It's not as if it's something extra they have to do. They just have to do it in a different way, in a more efficient and timely way. Get the right information produced at the right time. The problem at the moment in construction is the people who know how to build things, specialist contractors, get involved very late in the project, and their expertise only becomes available to the project late in the day, when it's very difficult to make any changes. So the have to be reformed to invite the specialists into the process, and that's what collaborative and integrated project delivery contracts do. It's a mechanism to bring early engagement of the specialists into the process, more manufacturing. So yeah. Anyway, look, I'll just go very quickly, but I think it's really important when we're talking across design, construction, operations, that we're all talking about the same thing. And I used the example earlier of when you go into a shop and look for a spare part for your, it has a number on it, and like in a few seconds, the person can find the spare part. They don't have to go and spend 3 hours with lever arch files looking for stuff. It's all codified. Every part in the car has a code and a classification, and everybody knows whether you're buying the the part from China or Germany or the United States. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same part. Everybody knows they're talking the same language. Okay, and that allows manufacturers to be very efficient in the way it purchases parts and assembles parts through codification and digitization. So we need to do the same thing in construction. We need to take every element of the built environment, if you take a city, for instance, and begin to break it down into its parts and codify every part using a classification system. In the UK and Ireland, we use a classification system called class. I mean, there are other classification systems in the world. In America, they use OmniClass. You know, in the Nordic countries, they use Co-Class. You know, there's various classifications, but that's what, you know, we have to get to a point where every component of a building is understood by both a machine and a person. Yeah, so there's a code. So when you look at the classification of a residential development, you know, there's a code and there's a description. The code, that CO 4510, nobody's meant to understand that. That's for a machine to understand. Machines love. You know, the humans understand residential development, but you break it down. You can break something complex down right down to individual components. And I think that's the way we need to begin to think about buildings and infrastructure. They are just as, you know, you're just taking standard components that are available on the market and you're building them into something specific. You know, at the component level, these are all standardized things that you can buy in the marketplace. And if we just pick this one component, I can describe the digital version of this one component. So you have a physical component, in case it's an air handling unit, but the digital version of that is actually a few things. Firstly, there's some geometry or graphical data that describes that thing in terms of its size and its shape and where it is in space. So, you know, that sort of three-dimensional information is incredibly important, because the component has to be somewhere in space and it has to occupy space. But you know, so that other things know they can't go into that. And it has to, that component is related to other components. So this unit will be connected to various ducts and electrical supply systems. So that's important, that the geometry is there. What's nice in BIM is that once you have the component can actually draw itself on a drawing. So nobody has to draw drawings anymore. You know, the component can display itself as a plan, a section, whatever view you want of that. Okay. The second type of information is all the physical and properties of this component. So who's the manufacturer? What's the air rate? What's the fire rating? What's the acoustic rate? You know, like that sort of critical information be used for design and analysis and, you know, ongoing performance. That's recorded as non-graphical data or properties and the nice thing in a BIM process is that data could be used to generate schedules. So nobody has to type out schedules anymore. No, you know, the schedule can be from the database. And the combination of the geometry and the data allows you to do things like coordination and clash detection, or look at sequence of things over time. So you can connect time to these objects. You can connect a cost database to these objects to look at getting accurate of everything. You can connect performance data like UV values, performance values, or carbon content, embodied carbon content, etc., and begin to calculate and analyze those across the whole building. So yeah, the combination of the geometry and the data becomes incredibly useful. And then I don't want to forget about documents, because to sell this air handling unit on the market, you still have to have documentation that says it's gone through testing procedures. There's an operator's manual, there's some declaration of performance, construction product regulations in Europe that say that data has to be available to people so they can safely use that component and that stuff will be stored as documents. So BIM to me is all three types of data. And that's important because a lot of people think BIM is just this nice graphical 3D model. But that's only one part of it. It's like you have to have all three components in the building. You have to have these three types of data. And this data has kept somewhere, and it's kept in the common data environment. So, and then finally, there's this talk about the idea of a digital twin in the industry, that there'll be a digital of a building or a piece of infrastructure. Well, that can only come at you make a connection between the physical and the digital through devices or sensors. But unless you get the first part right of getting all the data, it's no point even talking about the last part. So I think if you take any project and think, okay, for every component, before we go and execute the work on site, we should have geometry of it, we should know the data, and we should have all the documentation in order to do that. And then I think this idea of planning before you're doing, I mean, this is a really important principle and part of the sort of agile methodologies. You don't just people a task and let them go off and do it. You have to plan what that task is first and set out, what the outcome of the task is going to be, and then go do the task so that you have something to check against. So I'm sure you've all heard of plan, act, but what I see in our industry is people forget to plan. They go straight into working. They don't take a few minutes, hours, or whatever to say, okay, before we do the work, let's decide what the work is. Let's decide what the outcome is going to be, so that when we do the work, we can meet that objective, and then go through this loop where the one meets the objective of the next task, etc. So, so there's a clear of need, input, process, output, and end product, and validation, verification that needs to happen. And I don't see people do this in our industry. People just go off and do the work and end up doing the wrong, end up doing the work twice, or 3 or 4 times. Is crazy. I'll go through these quickly now, but I really want this point about who is responsible to manage the information on a project. And because a lot of people think it's one person, like I've seen projects where you talk to the directors and they say, oh yes, we have a BIM guy or girl on this project, as if it's one person's job to the information of the whole project. Whereas if you look at the ISO 1950 standard, it describes information management as a function rather than a specific role, and it's a function that's carried out by multiple people at levels. So you could break down a project into 3 main phases, like design, operations, but within each phase, at the very bottom, you'll have the people who are producing the information, the architects, the engineers, the specialist contractors, whatever. They produce the information, and their company will have an information manager who's responsible to check the information and the quality of information of their input. That's called a task information manager. They then feed that up to the main lead appointee for that phase, who also have a information manager that's checking all the information from the different parties and pulling it together. And then they'll hand that over to an information manager, which is working for the client or the owner. And so you can see within a single project, there could be 20 or 30 information managers, and it's just an important point that it's not one person to make sure this happens. It's everybody's job. Okay. Standards are incredibly important. I know standards is one of those words where you immediately switch off and you become bored, and you're probably very tired at the moment just because you heard the word standards. Don't like to, because what people think about standards is, it's just extra work, it's life difficult, it's it's stuff I don't want to. That's what people think. It's it's built into them. But actually, the reality standards are the reason things work. So when you open the tap in your kitchen, clean water comes out that doesn't kill you. Like, that's because of standards. Or when you shop and you buy food, and that food isn't poisonous, that's because of standards. The reason you drive down the road and there's not chaos, it's because like everything that works really well, the internet, just the fact that you and I are across different countries and the people from all sorts of places, is because of standards, internet standards, communication standards. So standards are brilliant things. They make things work. And when it comes to what we do in construction, we really need to embrace these standards. And I wanted to point out on this picture that information management is central to everything. Like, you can't manage a project without information. There is no project management without information management. In fact, there's no project without information. So without information, there's no project, and without information management, there's no project management. And even after the project, you can't operate and maintain a building without information. So asset management needs information management. And only then, once you've got project or asset management correct, can you think about organizational management and 9001. And it's really funny to me that companies all around the world have this badge, saying we are ISO 9001 compliant, but none of them have an information management badge or a project management badge or an asset management badge. So
crazy.
So they get this badge that says that they're super efficient and they have this quality control system. For what? Because they don't have any information management standards. Or I just wanted to explain that there's this relationship between information management and other standards, including safety management, environmental management, etc.
I have a question. What about Ireland? What is for the moment the standard? What is the about law and projects?
So Ireland is part of the EU, and the EU have adopted ISO 19650 as a European standard. So that means every country in the EU has to adopt that standard as a national standard. So you can't have a different. Now that was easy in Ireland because we didn't have a standard for information management before ISO 19. We adopted ISO 19650. It's the Irish standard, and we've developed our own annex. So if you'll know, with ISO 19650, it has the opportunity to create a national annex that's specific to your country, and a national annex in Ireland. So I think we were the second country after the UK national annex. I think there's a few others now. I think Canada have a national annex. There was another country that recently, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It's So I think we are embracing, but that doesn't mean the whole industry has embraced the standard. That just means the standard is there. That's the problem with this, is the standard can be there, but people still have to use it. Unless it's called up, it's called up in law. The only way to make a standard, because standards are voluntary, so the only way to make a standard mandatory is to call it up in law, and that hasn't happened yet. So there is no law that says you have to use standard. So people still they can choose. Now, obviously, the way to mandate a standard is client requirements. So if a client says you will use the standard, then you have to use the standard. Otherwise, you're not fulfilling your contractual obligations.
Is it the case? Is it the case now, or it
Yeah,
depends?
clients are, yeah.
Okay.
So on projects, not all clients, but definitely on projects where we're advising the client, that's what we're writing into the client requirements, is that everybody participating on this project will follow these standards, design and construction. Yeah, and so it's mandatory on those projects.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, and I suppose, like, as we move from this analog paper-based world to a world of, I think we all have a lot to learn about data management, data science, you know, and because data, you can have lots of information, but it can be useless if it, you know, if it doesn't have the right quality, etc. So, you know, so you got to take data and you got to add contextual information, things like location, time, cost, and that then it becomes informative, and then, you know, then you have to interpret the meaning of that information to a specific situation or project. That becomes knowledge, and finally it gives insight on how to act, you know, and that's when it becomes wisdom. So you look at information at these different levels. At the top level, information that's useful for acting is usually quite abstract information, but it's useful. Whereas if you look at the bottom, you can have tons of data, but it's, you know, useless unless it's gone through this process of refining and improving the information. So the standards are important. Oh, sorry.
We have a question from Andrew, so you can read. What are you talking? What do you think about this question? I'm struggling to see good description guides, and our client will develop their own BIM use case. So it's I think it's about BIM adoption and how a client can make its own standard. If I notice a good question.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I suppose there are good descriptions and guides. Not some Ireland, but I mean the Institute of Architects in Ireland have produced a useful guide for the industry, but there are also guides in the UK and Scotland and various other jurisdictions available. I mean, the easy way to think about it is a client could have multiple assets. So if you're a client, you could have a building, which is your head office. You could have a warehouse, which is where you store stuff. You could have a data center. You know, so you can have multiple assets, and you, at an organizational level, certain information about all those assets, even though they're very different. Then, but that's at a high level. So OIRs are sort of high level organizational requirements. But then when you look at each asset, like the information that you're required to building is different to the information you're required to manage a data center. So you get the specific asset information requirements of those different assets for operations. Okay. And then if you're going to carry out a cap project, which like an extension or a renovation or a new build, well, then you have to define information requirements for that capital project, which will then ultimately translate into the exchange information requirement, or EIR. The exchange information requirement is what you're actually going to buy from the supply, from a design and construction point of view. But those information requirements are informed by all these other, you know, organizational requirements, asset requirements, project information. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's, yeah, they're all related, but they're at different levels of understanding.
Thank you, Andrew, for your question. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, thank you, Ralph, for your answer.
Andrew. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was just competency. You know, like in the industry, we have to raise the competency of people. have been operating in a non-digital analog world for many years and got to learn, and of course this this curve is interesting. It's the normal distribution curve, but yeah, when you distribute competency across everybody, there's going to be a few people that are on the high end of competency, the sort of as an early adopters, and there's going to be a few people that are on the other end that are never going to change. So the laggard, there's some people that just won't change, and they'll just have to retire. Yeah, in the middle somewhere is the majority, but it's going to be up to the people on the high end, innovators and early adopters, probably people on this call, to influence and bring the rest of the people along. So, yeah, and I just wanted to mention that not everybody is the same at the same level of understanding and competency. So even in, you could say that there's about 20% of people that are at the higher end of competency in this subject, and 80% of people are on the lower end, and there's probably a percentage of people that will never improve the digital process, even if you held a gun to their head. So, and then the last point is, well, one of the last points was to think about. Of course, we all want things to change. We all want things to be better. We want construction to be cheaper and safer, and more productive and deliver better outcomes. All those kinds of things. So when you say who wants change, yes, everybody wants. But then when you realize you have to do something and lead and take responsibility, well, then nobody wants to do anything. So that everybody wants it done for them by somebody else, and that's everybody's waiting for somebody else to do something. You see that in countries, and even in Ireland, you talk to people and they say, well, we're waiting for the government to do something. We're waiting for the clients to do something, or we're waiting for the architects to do something, or we're waiting for the contract. Everybody's waiting for somebody else to do something before they are prepared to do something. But leadership is about waiting. It's about seeing what you can do and what you can influence at whatever level you're at. So, you're not a leader or a follower. As I said in the beginning, like you're both. On the one hand, you have a responsibility to yourself, your business, to be a leader, and then on the other hand, you have to learn people that have gone before you. So you have to be a follower at the same time. So in this story of our industry, there are three types of people, and I suppose I want to encourage people to be the one type. So there are people who make better. They take responsibility. They'll manage and coordinate information. They'll produce quality information that brings good results. And I'm just calling those people the heroes, the solution providers. They make things better. And then on the other hand, there's people who are making things worse. They just don't care. They just produce poor quality information. They don't care what impact that has. Some people even purposefully withholding information. They just create the challenges that we have to face all the time. They're the villains. And then in between, you have people who are undecided if they're a hero or a villain. They just say, well, I'm just doing what I'm told. Nothing to do with me. It's not my problem. It's not my responsibility. And but I suppose this slide was to encourage people not to be a villain or a victim, but to stand up and do the right thing. And often doing the right thing is not the easy thing. Like the easy thing is to do nothing. The easy thing is just to be a victim, just to say, it's not my problem. I can't do anything. My boss said, my client said, my guide, whatever. But so sometimes it's hard to stand up and say, well, you know what, I can, in the work I do, I can be better at what I do. I can produce better quality information. I can do it in a more efficient. I can contribute to a better functioning and as I learn to become more competent at it, I can share that knowledge with other people and bring people along with me. So it takes a special type of person to be a leader or a hero, and I want to encourage people to, because something has to happen. There has to be action, and we've got to get from where we are to where we want to be. Like I said at the beginning, in Ireland, we're in a journey, the journey that started in 2010, but it finished the journey. We're still on the journey. We're still going, and we're getting better, and we're becoming more productive, becoming more lean. So we're learning these things as we go along. As we go, encounter obstacles and problems and threats and all sorts of things, but we have to move forward. And the important thing to realize is, in order to move, you have to do something. You have to spend energy. You have to spend money. You have to give up poor practices, etc. So you have to do something forward. So you have to look at what motivates you and what's holding you back as you move forward. So I thought I might end with just talking about a couple of things we worked on. None of these are perfect projects, I suppose, from a BIM point of view, but we've learned fantastic lessons from each of these projects. This particular project was 150 million new headquarters building for electrical supply board in Ireland. Fantastic project, award-winning project. It's just finished. But the interesting thing about this project is they didn't use BIM from the beginning. So some of the designers were using BIM tools to produce their things, but they weren't using a BIM process. Under ISO 19650 sharing models, they weren't doing any of the other things. So the client, just the project was going to tender for construction, the client asked, can we implement BIM now? Which that was a big challenge, because obviously all the work that had been done up to that point, it hadn't used this ISO 19650 standard, but we still managed to develop a strategy. Now, it did mean that a lot of the responsibility of all the information that was produced was put into the construction stage. So it probably added some additional cost to the construction stage, which was unnecessary. Had the strategy been put in place beforehand. But anyway, it had to be done. But they got through the whole construction. So there was a shell and core construction with one contractor that used BIM, and then there was a fit-out contract with another contractor that also used BIM, and at the end, the client got all this information. Now it's just recently completed and opening, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes into the ongoing operations of that building. But lesson from this project is, the sooner you can implement the strategy, the better. It makes it easier. But also, if you are halfway through a project, it might still be possible to implement a strategy. So I suppose those are the lessons. A different project for sort of an investment client who didn't really understand BIM, and they're not going to buy the building. So the building will be let to a different occupier. Didn't really know as a client what they wanted out of BIM. And we had to inform the client that it was in their interest to implement this strategy to help the design and construction process go more efficiently. So ultimately, there would be a client, an occupier of this building. Somebody has to look after this building, and they would need information. And so, even though that particular client didn't have a specific need themselves as an investment client, they could see the benefit, and they were good enough to let us help them put their strategy. So another great project. And I suppose this was a similar project, but also an investment client, a real estate investment trust, who had 2 buildings. Again, BIM wasn't implemented at the start, so it was at the planning stage. And in this instance, actually, the design, they were appointed without checking the capability. So we had to train the design team and help the design team get started. And but everybody did a great job in the end. The contractors, so the whole project went the process. And the thing that drives these is having a very clear client requirement. So the client agreed to let us work with them and write a clearly defined requirement, so they knew what was expected of them. So we see too many projects where people say it's BIM, but there's no clear instruction, no clear requirement. So that's basically what I want to talk about. I hope that was informative and encouraging. Are Ireland the world champs of BIM? I don't know.
Yeah.
We're not the first, so we are following other people, but we're moving quickly because we're a small and agile country.
Yeah, thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was very, very great. So in the comment, do not hesitate. Don't be shy. If you have any question, it's time to ask. I have a question, an open question, which is, what will be the future of BIM in Irish? How do you see things about the future evolution and future approach in the BIM in your country? BIM and maybe in digital construction at all. You can put in edit AI and all of things.
Although, I mean, the way I see BIM, the beginning is, it's been a long journey. So it's a never-ending journey of digital transformation. Starting years ago, as we moved from drawing boards and pens to computers, more efficient software, more efficient computers. There's going to be changed devices, so people will walk around with tablets and phones, and eventually they'll have something on their helmets, like smart glasses. So the technologies will always change. I mean, I think that's what happens with digital technologies, is that they're always evolving and people are trying new things, and they're constantly looking for ways to improve communications. I mean, that's what it's all at the end of the day. All these technologies is about communicating ideas from one to another. I mean, even the technology we're using now to talk to each other, would have, like previously, maybe we would have talked on a phone, or maybe I'll come over to Belgium, or you would have come over to Ireland, or whatever. So but we can communicate now through these technologies, and they're just going to get more interesting and better all the time. But I think there's no end point in evolution. Like it never ends. So you're always changing, and I think that's the thing people have to realize, is you can't say, well, I'll do X, Y, Z, and then that's it, I'm finished, I'm done. That's but I've reached the goal. It's a goal that never reach, because the goal keeps moving, and that's and you need that, and that's why you just need to start moving. It doesn't matter where you are today. If you just start in the right direction, then and keep moving, then you'll keep ahead. But if you sit and do nothing and just watch everybody else moving, then you're going to fall behind. So for your career or your business or even country, your industry, I think people have to think about these things, because even country, if all the other countries are moving ahead and you're not, like, you'll become the least competitive country, and for your career. Like, you don't want that. You don't want that for yourself. You don't for your business. You don't want that for your country. So I think everybody just needs to move, however fast or slow they want to, but don't sit still.
Okay, nice, perfect. Okay, so we don't have any more question. Okay, so we will end. So, but before to end the event, I'd like to encourage you to represent your country. So the World Cup will continue. So if you want to represent your country in the World Cup of BIM, not football or rugby or other sport, it will be in BIM this time. So I will just put on the comments a link, a form. Just have to fill it, and we will keep in touch with you as soon as possible. And also we have we will send a gift for people who were people who were registered on the Luma link. So I hope that we will send you this link, this gift, and next week. And yeah, so stay in touch. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn. Me and Ralph, and we hope that we will see you on the next event. Have a nice day, and bye bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and for the invite to speak to you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.